Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Family Treehouse, a podcast series brought to you by Storied, where I chat with people who have a passion for genealogy, storytelling, or both. I am your host, Heather Honert, and today I love to attend Roots Tech. Just got back from Roots Tech a few weeks ago, and I love to attend in person every year. It's just a great way to be surrounded by people who love family history and storytelling as much as I do, and super excited that I got to meet today's guest, Deborah Maddox, in person. So it's always nice to have that. A lot of times my guests, I don't get to meet them in person. So I got to meet Deborah at Roots Tech. And Deborah has spent the last 11 years as a staff genealogist for the National Society Sons of the American Revolution. I'm so jealous. She has developed and presented SAR seminars to public and private groups, including Roots Tech. And Deborah, I am just so excited that you're here today. Welcome.
Thank you. So first of all, I'd like to just say thank you so much for being able to talk to me about it and being able to share my love of all this wacky history and genealogy that we love so much. So thank you for inviting me.
Oh, happy to. I love it when I get to chat with people that are just as passionate as I am about it. So let's start, Deborah, by telling us about your background. How did you kind of get started in the field of family history and storytelling?
So I was born into it. I really was. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, come on now. The storytelling aspect has always been in my family. I am an only child of an only child on my father's side. So I didn't have any first cousins or aunts or uncles on that side. But then on my mother's side, she was number six out of seven children. But out of all of her siblings, they had 18 grandchildren, and I am number 18. And there is a 4-year gap between me and my oldest cousin on her side. So when we would, and we were lucky enough that my mother lived out of those seven siblings, her and two of her other siblings lived in the same town here in Louisville. And so we were able to go and see them quite a bit. And so anytime that there was a family reunion or a family dinner or whatever, we would all get together. But inevitably, most of the older grandkids would go and start pairing off in teams and
Yeah.
groups and everything. And so I was either stuck at the adult table listening to all these stories, or I had to go and try to beg somebody to play with me. And it just felt really natural for me to be able to listen to those stories. And so it really added, like, they weren't my great aunts and uncles that I was hearing about. These were people, Aunt Canella and Uncle Irv, all the different people.
Yes. Yeah.
So it was a very humanistic aspect of it. Then when I turned 18, my grandmother on my father's side and her oldest sister died within about 6 months of each other.
Yeah.
And at that point, I realized, oh, wait a minute. I'm really interested in this, and these people are going to start passing away, and their stories are going to start going away. I need to start, kind of documenting it. So I was able to start doing that, and it actually gave a common thing for my father and I to work together on, because we
Yeah.
would go and try to dig around and see what we could find. So it's really been since that very early age that my mother used to tell a story about how I don't understand Deborah. I don't understand her at all. She said, because we would go on family trips and she would be like, who's that? Where's that cemetery? Let's go in that cemetery. And she's like, we don't have any people buried there at all. I don't understand why she wants to go in there. And I'm like, because it was fascinating to me to be able to see
Yes.
those, whoever they were, you know.
Yes. Yeah. That makes me laugh because it makes me think when I'm in the car, my husband and I, we are transplants to Georgia from Indiana. And we just will go around, right around on the weekend just to check out the area. And it inevitably will pass the cemetery and he'll be like, did you want to stop there? And I'm good today. Or yeah, let's stop here. I want to check this out. So I
Yeah,
get
because you
it.
got to stop and think, is it in the fall when stuff has died back? Or is it in the springtime when all the critters are starting to come out? Because if it's in the springtime, I will wait on going into a cemetery because there's too much stuff.
Yeah, for sure. That is very true. Very true. Deborah, why do you think that, beyond the records, why do you think storytelling is so important to family history?
So I've thought about a lot about this in the last couple days. Um, I think it's because, as I said earlier, it we can get those dates and places,
Yeah,
but that doesn't help us when we have a down day. That
yeah,
doesn't help us when we're going through a divorce and we
yeah,
don't understand why we are where we are. But by
yeah,
knowing those family stories and knowing that someone else has gone through what we're possibly going through, or a death or whatever, then it starts making you understand I'm not alone. I'm not the only
yeah,
person that's ever gone through this. My
yeah.
grandmother on my mother's side lived for the last 30 years of her life without her husband because he died in the 60s. So
Hmm. Hmm.
when you start knowing that and you know that personality, I remember my granny. And
Yeah,
I remember she was a resilient person, and she was, capable and everything. It starts making you understand that there's been loss, and there's been births, and there's been addition. All the things that we live in our life has been perpetual and has gone on since time immemorial. So
yeah,
I think it makes it a little bit easier. But also, cavemen and women, I always envision them sitting around and telling the day stories. They
yeah,
saw this, did that, whatever. And so I think it's been ingrained in us as humans to
yeah.
be able to tell those stories and to relate, and it makes everything so much more relatable.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that perspective. I feel like I've had guests that have kind of hinted at that, but you really hit the nail on the head. I think that's just a good way to say that. And I'm thinking cavemen, I mean, and they documented on, cave walls,
Right,
those stories.
right.
So yeah, I agree. I think it is just part of us as humans. Deborah, talk about today I want to do some, I mean, I love talking to people just kind of as their personal, experiences, but then also with your SAR experience too. I definitely want to incorporate that in for people with that have patriots, and how can they incorporate that kind of thing. So the question I have for you is, can you recommend any resources or tools for somebody that wants to start researching their patriot and writing those family stories? And I do want to try to do kind of a focus for SAR on this for the Sons of the American Revolution. What might somebody use?
Well, the good news is that we're really using the same records that a regular genealogist would, and I say regular genealogist, but a
Yep.
genealogist would use. We're
Yep.
using the
Perfect.
same payroll cards, we're using the same pension files, we're using the same, county histories, we're all the same documentation that you would use to prove your lineage just for
Yep.
yourself are the same things that we're using. Now, are there special books such as Mass Soldiers and Sailors, that is for soldiers and sailors in the Revolutionary War that were out of Massachusetts, that's a, however many volume set. Yeah, we use that because that's something that they have um, um, compiled all of those
Yep.
records into
Yep.
one place.
Yep.
So yeah, we use those, but in essence, it's really all the same primary source documentation and even some secondary source documentation
Yep.
that we would use for just regular genealogy. So
Yep. Yeah, that's helpful. I think that some people think that, applying for SAR is, I mean, not that it's, there aren't things that you have to compile, but I love that you made the comment that we're doing the same records. We're using the
right,
same records
right.
when we're searching for our
And the
family.
good thing is there are special websites for DAR and SAR where you
Yep.
can go and see, has someone else already used that
Yep.
ancestor. So there
Yep.
are those, but that's sometimes I feel like people are putting the cart before the horse,
Yep.
because you really have to do the lineage all the way back to that era. And then you
Yeah.
can start finding the service, because so many times people will say, well, I know I'm descended from, whoever. And it's like, okay, maybe I agree, you are, but you have to kind of prove it.
Right.
So
Right.
that's the thing, is that, working your lineage all the way back to that era on all those lines, or as many lines as you can, and then finding the service that validates that particular person's, the documentation that validates that person's service. That's the
Yeah.
important thing.
Yeah, do you ask this question? So I've gone through DAR and know that process. So tell people if they are interested in trying to join SAR, do they have help? Is there help out there that they can get
There
to join?
is. So it's very much the same as DAR, and it's also very much the same as almost any lineage organization,
Yeah,
which is
yeah,
where you find out that you have an ancestor and you want to start doing start proving that you are descendant of that person. It does have to be a direct line descent, first and foremost.
yeah, yeah,
So it has to be one of your ancestors. It cannot be your ancestor's brother or
yeah,
sister. But it does have to be direct line. But other than that, you can go to the website and SAR.org, and from there we have a link that says join now, and then it actually puts you in. There's a contact form that you can fill out, and from there it'll come in house. We send it to someone within that state or that local chapter that's close to where
yeah,
you are, and then they will reach out to you and kind of start helping you through the process. We do not ever want anyone to feel overwhelmed by it, because it really
yeah,
can seem overwhelming. But I always go with the analogy of, how do you eat an elephant, but one bite at a time? And it's the same
yeah.
thing, in the fact
Right.
that, yes, you do need to document all of this. But like, even for myself, whenever I joined DAR, it wasn't until I had already done all the research, and then I started getting interested in DAR, and I'll go, well, wait a minute, I've already got all the documentation. So I
Yeah.
only needed to
Yeah.
get like my birth certificate and one or two other things. So
Yes.
typically people will probably have more than what they think they
Yeah.
have
For
already
sure.
researched.
Yeah. And I think too that, it getting it all together and getting it done and you've submitted everything. I think it's that for me, it was the day that I got that notification in the mail that, you were approved and here's your number. I can't even describe it. It was just such an exciting thing. So I
Well, and
definitely
not only
encourage
that,
people.
Heather, but I also think about it from this aspect, is tying into the storytelling.
Yes.
You want, so many people will ask me, well, why does it matter to join a lineage organization, whether it be
Yeah.
DAR, SAR, whatever? And
Yes.
and it's always, my answer is, do you want that story to be remembered? Do you want that story
Yes.
to be documented? Because having that one person in your lineage that did that one thing, whatever it is, you're
Yes.
now validating that story, and you're also telling it, and you're recording it
Yeah.
for posterity.
Yes. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I love that. Let's talk about when we're writing story, when you're writing stories, what are three tips, your top tips that you have when writing stories that you can share with our audience?
Mine are really easy. Do
Good.
it, do it, do it, do it. And I know
Yeah,
that sounds like, oh, really, that's only one tip, but it because for me anyway, I start writing and then I just get overwhelmed and then I have to
yeah,
walk away from it. But if
yeah,
I just keep remembering to myself, just do it. It's going to be okay. This isn't the final incarnation of it. Just get it
yeah.
down so that it's not gone.
Right.
So, we can be our own worst enemies sometimes.
Yes, for
And
sure.
I am my own worst enemy. I have a blog that I haven't added anything to in
Oh,
or amount of time that I care to admit to. Uh,
yeah, yeah,
but it's just, just do it. Just get it down. And it's not in the final incarnation. It doesn't have to, I mean, write it the way you speak. And I know
right.
sometimes people are like, really, I don't want to do that. But it's like, that even adds a personality to it.
Without a
Um,
doubt.
by being able to write it the way you speak, I wrote a final letter for my kids. And I've been preparing this for years as I just kind of hone it and finalize, hey, this is where this is and this is where that is. And at the very bottom of it, I wrote, ha ha ha, points to mom because you just read this in my voice, knowing that they were going to hear my voice as they were reading
Yes.
it. And so
Yes.
it's, that's something else that's part of our personality that we want to have remembered.
Yeah. I love that. And as you were telling that story about writing that for your kids, it made me think, first of all, I am like very OCD about I have to have things just right. And I feel like I've had to let that go in this hobby and profession. You just have to, let it go. And I think I'm okay with that. But I've been working on something that my grandma wrote. And same thing, I'm like, I have dedicated myself to not change anything about the way she wrote it because it was handwritten and I'm transcribing it. And I haven't changed it at all. And I love it because you are 100% right. Every time I read it, I hear my grandma saying it every time
Yep.
I read it. So I love that tip. That's a very good one. I love that. I love this question. This is a new one that I haven't asked a whole lot of people yet on the podcast. If you could meet one ancestor in person, who would it be and what would you ask them?
Well, uh, so that's a good question. Um, my answer would be my second great grandfather,
Okay.
and I call him Slick Willie because he was every document I have for him has been like, oh, really? That's, ooh, wow, that's crazy. And I wouldn't ask him any questions. I would just want to talk to him
Yeah.
because he was going to be my answer of my favorite family story. So if
Yeah.
you don't mind, I can tie the two of those in together.
I love that.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. I was
So
hoping it was going to be a Slick Willie
so
story.
oh, it's a good story. So my great grandfather, we called him, his name was Benjamin Lewis de Spain, and he was born in 1872. And he was a twin. He was his mother and father's eighth or ninth child, depending on which
Yeah.
order
Yeah.
they were born in.
Yeah.
And the father was Slick Willie, his name
Yeah.
William Lewis de Spain, and his mother was Eliza Ann Scott.
Okay.
So they had been married for 20 years probably at this time. Well,
Yeah.
Slick Willie decides about 7 days or 8 days after the twins were born that he was going to take his wife's sister and they were going to leave. They left. So this is part of the stories I'm going to tie back to sitting around the table at my aunt's house. It inevitably would come back to how he left, how no one ever knew what happened to him, and
Yeah.
how that the sister-in-law, her name was Mariah, came back to where they lived with two children, and they were his children. And so my great grandfather always had to see his half siblings because they lived on the same farm as they did. And so he always had to see them and always, know that his father had done this. So
Yeah.
that's the first part of the story. Well, then as I start researching, I'm like, I'm never going to find this guy because he went wherever and died
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, then I start Google alerts because I had done a Google search and I said, save this as a Google search. And if anything ever
Yeah.
comes up with this, alert me. So it
Yeah.
alerted me that there was a notification about this William L. Despain's um, um, tombstone request because he
Okay.
was in the Civil War. He was
Got
a
it.
second lieutenant, but in the Civil War documentation, he has deserted. So in 18, yeah, exactly. He was only there like, 8 months or 9 months or whatever. He was a second lieutenant and he deserted. So now you're getting a better picture of what this guy was like. So now whenever I see this tombstone request, I'm like, where is this tombstone? It's in Illinois, and it's
Okay.
by his widow that he has now left. And the short answer to this story is the fact that what I did was I started picking up research at that point. I realized he's gone to Illinois. He's married two separate women, a Louisa. She dies. He marries another woman. I think she was a Louisa as well. And that's who he was married to when he dies. She has now submitted a tombstone request as him being a Civil War soldier, that he deserves this tombstone. Well, then I start doing, now that I've got a place for him, I start doing all this research. Now I find him where he has tried to get a pension for being a Union soldier, and letter after letter after letter where he's written saying, I'm a good Union man. I was in the war and I did this and I did that and I've got these things, blah, blah, all this stuff. And he says, I didn't know I was supposed to get a discharge. They just told me to go home. I had no idea. So there's this whole story, and I'm just like, what? So then the more I start digging into it, it just becomes this like, and I told my aunt when I found out, I said, I found Slick Willie. And she said, you did? What happened? And so I started telling her this story, and she can't believe it because her entire life she's heard about how her grandfather, because this was her grandfather that died, and how he never knew what happened to his father, and blah, 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 all this whole story. And I'm just like, oh yeah, he went to Illinois and he went up there and he, died up there. And she was just like, I mean, it was kind of anticlimactic because
Yeah.
without the end of the story, you don't really know what happened to him. But
Yeah.
now that
Right.
you start hearing this entire story, I'm just like, I
Right.
want to be able to talk to this guy because not only did he have 9 children with one wife, he
So
deserted
crazy.
the Civil War. He then ends up absconding with his sister-in-law. So he's talked her into leaving.
Yeah.
He,
Right.
he then he ends up going to Illinois and talking 2 more women into
Yeah.
marrying him. So that's why I gave him the moniker of Slick Willie, but he is
Yeah.
the ancestor that I want to walk up to and go, what in the world? Because I just think he could, it sounds as though he could have sold ice to an Eskimo.
Yes.
Just
Yeah.
seems like that type of person. And it may be anticlimactic by the time I meet him and he's,
Yeah.
whatever. But he's just one of those ones of like, I just want to meet him because
Yeah.
he had something, because
Yes.
he had all these women that he was.
Yeah. I love the name Slick. Like listening to your story, I'm like, that could not be a more perfect name for him,
Oh,
for sure.
I just because I just and my husband, who does not care about genealogy
Yeah.
whatsoever, is,
Yeah.
I started telling him all these different stories and he's like yawn yawn yawn. But then when I started telling him that, he was just
Yeah.
like, what? So
So
yeah.
so tell me, is he so when he deserted, because I know Kentucky can be a cutoff, was he Union or Confederate?
Oh, he was a Union soldier.
Okay, it was Union for
Yeah,
sure.
and what was,
Okay.
to me, the hilarity behind this is the fact that, one, he's in a unit made up almost entirely of people from the community he lives in.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's got a
Yeah.
brother that is in that unit. He's got another cousin that's got the same name, William Despain, in that unit.
Yeah.
So that whole area really kind of, I mean, I think that unit had some other people from other counties, but it was predominantly that county.
Yeah.
So
Right.
for him to go and for him to be high ranking enough, he's a second lieutenant,
Yes.
and for him to claim, I had no idea I was supposed to get a discharge. To me, that's
Great.
like, really? Did you, what did you think you were filling out all this time that you were, a second lieutenant? Or,
Yeah.
and maybe I'm confused on what second lieutenants did, but
Right.
I just, yeah. So, and then for him to come back to the community
Yeah.
and live there for another 7 years, because,
Yes.
end of the War of 1865, 1872 is when he left. So he's there another 7 years.
Yeah.
And for the community not to go, hey, dude, you do realize you deserted. What,
Yes. Yeah.
it just adds more to the Is that why he
Yeah.
left? Was he tired of people calling him I don't know. I can make
Yeah.
all kinds of stories. So yeah, he's just a fascinating character.
Yeah. Have you found any, I love newspapers and can go on all day. Have you found any newspaper articles about him?
Yes. The best one is sorry, the best one is right after he left. His
Yeah.
father-in-law, the father of these two girls,
The two girls.
the
Okay.
two
Yeah.
girls, his wife and Mariah, um, puts in a Chicago newspaper
Okay.
because this is Greene County, Kentucky.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when I started doing research on finding out, once I found that one newspaper, I was like, well, let's see how many other newspapers it's in. This leaving abandonment of his wife and newborn children hit almost every newspaper from New York to California. It was
Holy cow.
amazing. They were picking it up, and it was only like a little like elopement from Greene County, Kentucky, blah blah blah. And I was just like,
Yeah.
what in the world? So that
It's
was the
crazy.
first thing that was amazing to me, is the fact that it went on so many different newspapers.
Yes. Yeah.
But the second one is when I found that one out of Chicago. It's it's this long of a newspaper article, and James G. Scott, the father-in-law, talks about how that he has absconded with his daughter and these two horses. He talks in detail about the horses, about how old they are, how high they are, what they look like, blah blah blah, how
Gosh.
I mean everything that you can think of about these horses. He
Yeah.
describes him, what he looks like. You know,
Yeah.
he was wearing this, he was da 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 da. The very last line is, and my daughter Mariah, 15 or 16 years old. So he gives in great detail all the stuff about the horses and about the guy that left. And my daughter, she's about 15 or 16. And,
Oh my
basically with the
God.
attitude of like, I really want these horses back. Mariah, not so much.
Yeah. That is just, that's amazing. That
So
is just,
he is the ancestor that keeps on giving, because just when I think
yes.
I've researched him out, now all this other stuff it starts coming out, and I'm just like, well, okay, he's going to be the one that I have a whole essay on or something. So
Yes. They're the best kind though. They are the best kind. For sure. That was great. That has to be, that has to rank up there as one of my favorite stories, if not the best. That's a good one. Oh, Deborah, let's finish up here talking about what kind of advice do you have for people that are just starting out? Because we've talked about people just feeling overwhelmed with, either the research or the storytelling. What would be some advice you give to beginners?
well, the all the normal ones, start with who you know, talk to all
Yeah,
of them, get all the elders first, get all of their stories as much as you can. but but also I think the thing that I would tell my younger self is, one, make sure I write down where I'm getting it. You know,
yeah,
Aunt
that's a good one.
Marcus's, you know, uh, story doesn't cut it. You need to put a little
Yeah,
bit more down than that. But
yeah,
also, I think just it's if you start it and you have to put it down for a little bit, don't worry. It's going to be there when you get back.
yeah,
Because yes,
yeah,
I've been doing research since 1989, but that has not been all of those years. I was married, I had two children, I got
yeah,
divorced, I had to go back to work, I got remarried. I mean,
yeah,
there's all of that. So you just pick it up as you can, but
yeah,
also learn the tools that you're using, whether it be, family search, or whether it be ancestry, or even just, Airtable, or whatever component you're using,
yeah,
and learn it and figure out the best way to use it for you, because not everybody is going to use them the same way that you do, because all of
yes,
us learn
yep,
things differently. So
yeah,
I would just really recommend finding all the different tools that's going to help you do it,
yeah,
because then that way you don't feel as overwhelmed.
yeah, yeah. For sure. I think that two things you said that I want to touch on quick. I love just the fact that life happens. I think that's so important. And you're right. I can't tell you how many times I've, gone for months and years and not touched a certain ancestor, and then can come back because I have researched. Um, and then I think too, finding the tools that are right for you or using a tool the way that works best for you. Everybody's so different. And I think that is great advice. I love that. I love that.
Yeah, and I would probably add to that is when you do put it down, make sure that you write down what your analysis,
Yep.
theory, hypothesis
Yes.
is, whatever, on the one that you're
Yep.
working on right now, because I cannot
Yep.
tell you how many times I have gone back and picked up that ancestor. And then when I start researching, I'm like, ooh, I wonder if this is what's, and I start kind of like piecing it together. And then I realize I have written something down, and that's the
Yes.
exact theory that I had come up with 5 years before. And I
Yes.
just hadn't
Yes.
read that part in order to know that, oh, this is where I need to pick up. I was just re-looking at the documents. So I would
Yep.
definitely, even if it's just a note, a post-it note on there,
Yep.
theory of blah, blah, whatever, just
Yep.
do that is very
Yeah,
helpful.
that's great. That's great advice. Well, Deborah, I just want to thank you for your expertise first and foremost, and then just your passion. It's evident. I love that. I'm just honored that you spent time with me today. So thank you.
It was such a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Until next time, friends, embrace the power of your family's untold tales and embark on a journey of discovery. Let the ink flow and the words dance as you weave together the threads of your ancestors' lives. Start writing your family stories today and let their voices echo through the generations to come at storied.com. Have a great day, everyone. And that brings us to the end of this episode of the Family Treehouse, where we celebrate the power of storytelling and preserving our family legacies. Storied is more than just a platform for sharing stories. Dive into those historical records and newspapers, discovering the hidden gems that bring your ancestors to life. Add branches to your family tree, connecting the dots between generations. Thank you for joining us on this storytelling journey. Your stories matter, and through Storied, they have the power to resonate across time and touch the hearts of generations to come. Keep uncovering your family's history and keep the spirit of storytelling alive with Storied.